Fear is a subtle enemy. It does not strike with sound or fury. It whispers. It seeps quietly into the mind and weakens it from within. It has destroyed more dreams than failure ever has. It has crushed more hopes than defeat ever could. And yet the truth is simple. Fear is a state of mind, and like any state of mind, it can be changed. Fear, though often regarded as a force beyond control, is nothing more than a state of mind. It does not exist outside the mind that creates it. It has no shape, no substance, and no reality beyond the thoughts that give it power. Fear cannot harm you unless you allow it to. It is a phantom, an illusion fed by uncertainty and doubt. Yet, because it originates in the mind, it can be controlled, redirected, and ultimately mastered by the same mind that produced it. Every person has experienced fear in one form or another. It might manifest as anxiety, hesitation, avoidance, or even physical symptoms like rapid heartbeat and tension. But all of these are effects, not the cause. The cause always lies in thought, in the silent assumptions and beliefs we entertain without question. The good news is this: what the mind creates, it can uncreate. The same imagination that visualizes failure can be trained to see success. The same inner dialogue that feeds fear can be replaced with words of power and resolve. Fear thrives in the unknown. When the mind does not have clear direction, it wanders. It fills in the gaps with worry and worst-case scenarios. It is the absence of purposeful thought that gives fear its strength. This is why the first step in overcoming fear is to take control of the mind. A mind without direction becomes a breeding ground for fear, but a mind focused on purpose becomes immune to it. When you decide what you want, when you fix your attention on your goals and ideals, fear begins to lose its grip. It cannot coexist with a mind that is fully occupied with faith and intention. Many people wait for fear to leave before they take action. They hope that one day they will feel brave enough to pursue their dreams or speak their truth. But fear never leaves on its own. It must be acted against. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the mastery of it. And mastery begins the moment you decide to move forward despite the fear. Every time you act while afraid, the fear becomes weaker. Every time you shrink away from action, it becomes stronger. Fear is a muscle, and so is courage. Whichever you exercise will grow. The most effective way to weaken fear is to replace it with a stronger mental state. Faith is the great antidote, not blind faith, but faith built on knowledge, preparation, and belief in a higher order. When you truly believe that you are capable, when you trust that life responds to bold action, and when you understand that nothing can defeat a mind that will not quit, fear begins to dissolve. It has no place in a mind anchored in faith. You cannot think two dominant thoughts at once, so when you choose faith repeatedly, fear no longer has space to grow. Discipline also plays a vital role in mastering fear. The disciplined mind is not easily swayed. It does not jump to conclusions or surrender to panic. It stays focused. It questions fear. It asks, is this real, or is this just a thought I've accepted? And in that moment of questioning, the illusion starts to crack. Fear is weakened by awareness. When you see it for what it is, a habit of thinking, a mental pattern, it begins to lose its mystery and its control. Ultimately, fear is not your enemy, it is a teacher. It shows you where your growth lies. It points to the places within you that still need strength, clarity, and faith. And when you begin to confront fear, not as something to be avoided, but as something to be overcome, you step into a higher version of yourself. You discover the truth that fear is not stronger than you. It only seemed that way when you were unwilling to challenge it. But once you do, it falls apart like smoke, and in its place you find power. Every fear that grips the human mind can be traced back to one of 6 primary roots. These 6 basic fears form the foundation of all others, each fear a variation, a disguise, or an extension of one of these core emotional states. They are the fear of poverty, the fear of criticism, the fear of ill health, the fear of loss of love, the fear of old age, and the fear of death. By identifying and understanding them, you take the first step toward dissolving their power. For no enemy is more dangerous than the one you do not recognize. The fear of poverty is perhaps the most widespread. It causes people to settle for far less than they deserve. It whispers lies about lack, limitation, and scarcity. It convinces men and women to play it safe, to avoid risk, to shrink their dreams to match their bank balance. It makes them believe that money is hard to earn, that opportunity is rare, and that success is reserved for others. This fear doesn't just hold people back financially. It robs them of their ambition, creativity, and confidence. Next is the fear of criticism. This fear keeps people silent when they should speak, passive when they should act. It causes them to suppress their originality, their ideas, their true nature, all to avoid the disapproval of others. The fear of criticism turns leaders into followers, artists into imitators, and dreamers into doubters. It's a fear rooted not in reality but in perception, and it leads to a life of quiet regret. The truth is, those who achieve anything worthwhile must learn to face criticism without allowing it to define them. The third is the fear of ill health. While concern for health is natural, obsession with disease becomes destructive. This fear magnifies every ache and symptom into disaster. It leads to unnecessary worry, self-imposed limitations, and even illness itself. The body responds to the dominant thoughts of the mind, and when those thoughts are filled with fear, the body begins to mirror that fear. The antidote is to think in terms of strength, resilience, and wellness, not in fear of what might go wrong. Then comes the fear of loss of love. This fear breeds jealousy, insecurity, and dependence. It causes people to chase affection, to lower their standards, to cling to relationships out of fear rather than joy. It distorts love into possession and drains the soul of dignity. True love cannot be sustained in the presence of fear. It must be rooted in freedom and self-respect. When you fear losing someone, you begin to lose yourself. The fifth basic fear is that of old age. It is not just the fear of growing old, but the fear of becoming irrelevant, forgotten, or incapable. It leads people to deny the passage of time, to fight the natural cycles of life, and to fear each passing year as a step closer to decline. But age, in truth, is a gift. With it comes wisdom, perspective, and depth. Those who accept aging with grace continue to grow in purpose long after youth has faded. Lastly, the fear of death, perhaps the most primal of all. It is the fear of the unknown, of the end, of being erased. This fear keeps people from living fully, from taking bold action, from loving without limits. But death is not to be feared. It is a natural part of life's cycle. Those who live with purpose, who create and give and love deeply, do not fear death. They know they will leave something behind that lives on. All 6 of these fears are mental patterns, not fixed realities. They can be dissolved through awareness, replaced with understanding, and transformed through conscious choice. The moment you name a fear, you reduce its power, and the moment you act in spite of it, you begin to master it. These 6 basic fears are the roots. Uproot them, and fear has no foundation left to stand on. The fear of poverty is one of the most destructive forces in the human mind. It does not merely threaten your bank account. It assaults your ambition, weakens your decisions, and chains your imagination. It is a slow and silent killer of dreams. This fear keeps people stuck in jobs they hate, tolerating conditions they resent, and living lives far beneath their potential. It whispers that striving is pointless, that opportunity is scarce, that wealth is reserved for others but not for you. It teaches you to expect little, ask for less, and be grateful for mere survival. This fear manifests not only in a lack of money, but in a mindset of lack. It causes hesitation when boldness is needed. It causes doubt when faith is required. People who live under the shadow of this fear often make decisions based not on vision, but on desperation. They choose what feels safe over what is right. They sell their time for a fraction of its worth. They look at their dreams through the lens of their current bank balance instead of the value of their potential. The root of this fear lies in a belief in limitation. It convinces people that money is evil, that wealth is corrupting, or that success must come at the expense of others. It trains them to focus on what they don't have rather than what they can create. As a result, they become reactive instead of creative. Instead of building wealth through service, innovation, or purpose, they become stuck in cycles of scarcity, hoarding, worrying, or chasing shortcuts. But the truth is this: poverty is not just a financial condition, it is a mental condition. The man who accepts poverty as his fate begins to think, act, and expect like one who is poor. But the one who sees abundance, regardless of temporary lack, begins to attract new ideas, new people, and new results. The key to overcoming the fear of poverty is to shift the mind from scarcity to possibility. You must train your thoughts to focus on opportunity, not on limits. No one climbs out of financial struggle by thinking more about what they lack. They rise by seeing what they can offer. Value, not money, is the true currency of wealth. When you increase the value you bring to the world, through skill, service, knowledge, or leadership, wealth becomes the natural byproduct. But to offer value, you must believe you have value. The fear of poverty attacks this belief. It tells you you're not good enough, not qualified, not capable. This is a lie. You are not poor because of your bank account. You are poor when you believe you have nothing to offer. To defeat this fear, you must act in faith. Begin to think, speak, and move like a person who is destined for prosperity. Make decisions based on growth, not comfort. Surround yourself with people and environments that uplift your expectations. Educate yourself about money, not with fear but with curiosity and purpose. Treat your time as valuable. Speak with conviction. Invest in your mind. Every time you choose confidence over doubt, you chip away at the fear of poverty. The wealthiest individuals are not those who fear poverty, but those who focus on value, vision, and service. They have trained their minds to look past lack and see possibility. That power is available to everyone, but only to those who reject fear as the master of their decisions. The fear of poverty is not a financial issue, it is a faith issue. Replace fear with belief, replace hesitation with action, and remember, abundance does not begin in your wallet, it begins in your mind. When that shift happens, the chains of limitation fall and the path to prosperity opens wide. The fear of criticism is one of the most subtle and paralyzing of all human fears. It creeps into the mind quietly, often disguised as humility, caution, or the desire to be accepted. But its effect is unmistakable. It silences bold ideas, suppresses creativity, and keeps people from expressing their true selves. It causes hesitation where there should be confidence. It makes people conform to expectations that were never theirs to begin with. And in its most dangerous form, it convinces individuals to betray their own potential just to avoid the opinions of others. This fear begins early. From childhood, we are conditioned to seek approval and avoid rejection. We're taught to be good, to not make mistakes, to follow the rules laid down by others, often without questioning their relevance to our unique gifts. As we grow older, this conditioning turns into internalized fear. The voice of the critic is no longer just external, It becomes internal. It tells us to stay quiet, to stay in line, to avoid standing out. It whispers that if we try something bold and fail, we will be laughed at, judged, or cast aside. The result is a society full of unspoken dreams and unrealized potential. People keep their best ideas locked away, afraid to risk being misunderstood. They take safe jobs, hide their talents, and leave behind masks, just to avoid criticism. They delay starting the business, writing the book, speaking the truth, or changing their lives, not because they lack the ability, but because they fear the opinions of those who are not even living courageously themselves. But criticism, when examined closely, holds no real power unless you give it power. Words cannot harm unless you accept them as truth. Judgment only sticks when it finds a wound to cling to. The more you define yourself by your own values, your own mission, and your own truth, the less you are swayed by the judgments of others. The fear of criticism dies when self-approval becomes more important than public approval. Understand this: no one who ever made a mark in this world escaped criticism. Every innovator, leader, artist, or thinker who challenged the norm was criticized, often harshly. It was not despite the criticism that they succeeded, but because they chose to act regardless of it. Criticism then becomes a kind of compass. When you're doing something that challenges mediocrity, you will disturb those who are attached to it. Their discomfort is not a sign that you are wrong. It is proof that you are growing beyond them. To overcome this fear, you must first understand its source. Most criticism comes from people who are afraid themselves, afraid of change, afraid of failure, afraid of seeing others succeed where they did not try. Their opinions reflect their limitations, not your potential. Once you see that clearly, you stop giving their words more weight than they deserve. You must also build a relationship with your own voice. Learn to trust your intuition, your desires, and your sense of rightness. Speak your truth in small ways every day, and you will grow stronger. Take action despite the fear of judgment, and each step will reinforce your courage. When you define your worth internally, external approval becomes irrelevant. The fear of criticism is not conquered all at once. It is defeated gradually, every time you choose authenticity over acceptance, expression over silence, and purpose over popularity. Eventually, the need to please others gives way to the joy of pleasing your soul, and in that space, true freedom begins. No critic is louder than the voice of your unfulfilled potential. Silence that voice by living boldly, speaking truthfully, and standing proudly. Even when others don't understand, your life is not a performance, it is a declaration. Make it with power, and let the critics fall away like dust behind you. The fear of ill health is one of the most deceptive and self-fulfilling of all the basic fears. It begins as a passing concern, often harmless, but when allowed to take root in the mind, it becomes a constant companion, whispering suggestions, amplifying symptoms, and gradually weakening both the body and the will. This fear feeds on worry, magnifies minor discomforts into imagined diseases, and causes the mind to fixate on the possibility of breakdown instead of the reality of strength. The human body is a marvelous machine, capable of repair, regeneration, and resilience far beyond what most people understand, but its power is directly influenced by the thoughts that govern the mind. Every emotion, every belief, and every dominant thought sends signals to the body. The person who constantly fears illness begins to speak, act, and move as if sickness is inevitable. They interpret every ache as a warning sign, every moment of fatigue as a sign of decay. In time, these repeated thoughts create the very condition they feared. This is not to suggest that medical issues are imaginary, certainly not, but many illnesses are aggravated, accelerated, or even created by prolonged mental tension, stress, and fear. The mind and body are not separate. What the mind believes, the body tends to follow. A person who lives in fear of disease weakens their immune system, tenses their nervous system, and lowers their body's defenses. Over time, the body conforms to the picture painted by the mind, but the opposite is also true. Those who fill their minds with thoughts of health, strength, vitality, and recovery tend to experience greater resilience, even in the face of real physical challenges. They become active participants in their own healing process. They refuse to surrender to fear. They choose to feed their minds with faith in wellness, not obsession with illness. Much of the fear of ill health is fueled by a culture that profits from worry. Constant media reports, advertisements for medications, and endless discussions about disease feed a collective mindset of fear. People become hyper, focused on symptoms, scanning for what might go wrong instead of celebrating what is going right. This fear-based approach to health turns attention inward in an unhealthy way, making people more susceptible to anxiety-driven conditions. The antidote is not ignorance, but intention. Learn how to care for your body, feed it well, rest it, and move it, but do so from a place of strength, not from panic. Approach your health as a source of power, not a ticking time bomb. Train your mind to expect vitality, to affirm strength, and to reject the constant whispers of fear. Also understand that some people use the fear of ill health as an excuse to withdraw from life. They use it to avoid responsibility, to gain sympathy, or to remain in their comfort zone. This unconscious habit allows the fear to linger because it has been rewarded. But freedom comes when you no longer identify with weakness, when you say to yourself, I am strong, I am healing, I am whole, and believe it, you reclaim the authority that fear once stole. Faith and fear cannot occupy the same space. When you fill your mind with belief in life, health, and strength, fear has no room to grow. Your thoughts, repeated daily, shape your inner world, and that inner world becomes the blueprint for your outer health. Speak to yourself with power, expect wellness, reject the language of decline. The fear of ill health is a thief that steals your energy before illness ever arrives. Take back that energy. Invest it in gratitude for what your body can do, in disciplined care, and in the unshakable belief that you were born not to fear sickness, but to thrive in strength. The fear of old age and death is a fear rooted not in the inevitable, but in the misunderstood. Aging is the most natural progression in life, yet many treat it as something to be avoided, denied, or feared. Death, the ultimate unknown, is often imagined as a tragic end rather than a natural transition. This fear robs people of peace, poisons the joy of the present, and causes them to retreat from living while they are still alive. But when properly understood, both aging and death reveal themselves not as enemies, but as reminders of purpose, urgency, and wisdom. The fear of growing old begins with cultural conditioning. We are taught from a young age to worship youth and to view aging as decline. Wrinkles are treated as flaws, gray hair as something to hide, and birthdays as warnings rather than milestones. People begin to associate aging with helplessness, irrelevance, and loss. This belief system causes them to dread the passing of time, which is tragic, because with age comes depth, understanding, and experience that youth cannot possess. The truth is, age is not what weakens people, it is the fear of age that does. The body responds to the mind. A person who sees themselves as declining often declines faster, not because their body gives out, but because their will does. On the other hand, those who embrace age with gratitude, who treat each year as a gift of wisdom and growth, remain vital, active, and sharp far longer than expected. They do not cling to youth, they evolve beyond it. Many of the world's greatest contributions, books, inventions, ideas, movements, were born not in youth but in maturity. It is during the later seasons of life that vision sharpens, ego softens, and purpose intensifies. When a person no longer seeks to prove themselves to the world, they begin to serve it more powerfully. But this power only emerges in those who respect the aging process, not in those who resist it. Then there is the fear of death, the most universal and misunderstood fear of all. People fear death not because it is unnatural, but because it is uncertain. The mind does not know what lies beyond, so it fills the void with fear. But death is not the end. It is a necessary transition. It is the final chapter of the physical experience, but not of the legacy one leaves behind. What matters most is not how long a person lives, but how deeply they live while they are here. This fear of death often paralyzes people. It causes them to avoid risk, to delay dreams, to cling to the familiar, and to settle for a small life. But ironically, it is the acceptance of death, not the denial of it, that leads to the fullest life. When you understand that your time is limited, you waste less of it. You speak more truth, you take more chances, and you love more boldly. Death gives life its urgency, and therefore its value. The only way to conquer the fear of old age and death is to replace it with purpose. A life filled with mission, service, and growth has no room for fear. When you are committed to evolving, to contributing, and to becoming more each day, aging becomes an adventure, not a decline. And when your life stands for something greater than your own survival, death becomes not a threat, but a doorway to what your time on earth helped to build. You were not meant to shrink with age. You were meant to expand in wisdom, in grace, and in legacy. And you were not meant to fear the end, but to live so fully that, when it comes, you leave with nothing left undone. Fear fades when purpose rises. Let your life be the proof. The most effective way to destroy fear at its root is to replace it with two forces far more powerful: definiteness of purpose and unwavering faith. Fear thrives in minds that drift, that lack clarity, that waver between indecision and doubt. It gains strength when a person moves through life without a central aim, reacting to circumstances instead of directing them. But once an individual discovers a clear purpose and holds to it with faith, fear loses its grip. It cannot dwell in a mind that is occupied by a burning desire and sustained belief. Definiteness of purpose means knowing exactly what you want from life and refusing to settle for anything less. It is not a vague hope or a half-hearted wish. It is a clear, bold statement of intent, backed by the full focus of your mind and the full effort of your being. When you have such a purpose, fear becomes irrelevant. It may still try to whisper doubt, but it is drowned out by the clarity of your goal. You no longer ask, "What if I fail?" You ask, "How can I make it work?" You stop hesitating because purpose does not leave room for hesitation. It demands action, and in that action, fear is silent. But purpose alone is not enough. It must be fueled by faith. Faith is the confident expectation that what you seek is seeking you, that your desire is not just possible, but inevitable if you persist. Faith is the mental attitude that says, "I don't need to see the whole path, I only need to take the next step." It is belief in the unseen, in the power of your own mind, and in the intelligence that governs the universe. It is the opposite of fear, and where faith is strong, fear cannot remain. Fear, by its nature, is always about what might go wrong. It looks backward to past failure or forward to imagined disaster. Faith, however, is rooted in the present. It operates from the now. It says, "I have what I need, I am who I need to be, and I will continue to grow stronger." The person who trains their mind to operate in faith no longer becomes enslaved by negative possibilities. They are too busy creating positive outcomes. The reason definiteness of purpose and faith are so effective against fear is because they give the mind direction. A drifting mind is like a ship without a rudder. It is tossed by every wave, every wind, every storm. But when the destination is clear and the captain has confidence, the ship holds its course. The winds may blow and the seas may rise, but the vessel moves forward. This is how the human mind functions under purpose and faith. It stays on course regardless of obstacles. Most people fail not because they lack talent or resources, but because they lack direction. Without a goal, they are vulnerable to fear. They start and stop, try and quit, constantly looking outside themselves for answers. But once a person truly decides what they want to achieve, and backs that decision with faith in their ability and right to succeed, fear begins to dissolve. The decision itself brings peace. The commitment brings confidence. The progress brings momentum. It is important to understand that this is not about blind optimism. It is about conscious mental discipline. Just as the body must be trained to gain strength, the mind must be trained to believe. You do this through repetition, through affirming your purpose daily, and through acting on your faith even when results are not immediate. Fear is patient, but so is faith. And with discipline, faith always wins. The battle against fear is not won in a single day. It is won in the daily choice to move toward your purpose, no matter how small the step. With purpose as your direction and faith as your fuel, fear has no place to hide. It cannot live in a mind that is clear, determined, and fully aligned with its higher calling. Replace fear with purpose, replace doubt with belief, and you will unlock a power that cannot be shaken.